Hello everyone, welcome back to my series of videos on the introduction to project management. In the last video we talked about what is project management, why it is important, and some basics of how you manage projects. We talked about the three steps of managing projects, the idea of planning projects, scheduling projects, and controlling projects. We talked about that. Now, in this video, we'll talk about the idea of project organization. So, how are companies organized when they're managing projects, right? And here is an example. This is a sample project organization. So you have a president for a company, and you have different departments within the company: human resources, marketing, finance, design, all these different things, quality control, and production management, and all of that. Now, each of these individual departments will have people who work for them. Say, a mechanical engineer works for design, a test engineer works for quality management, a scheduler works for production, right? Now, within this company, if you have multiple projects that are going on at the same time, a project is usually led by a project manager. A project manager is usually the person where, this is where the buck stops, right? So that's the person who manages everything to do with the project. Now, because the reason why usually projects are managed by a single project manager is because projects are one-off things. So you do not want multiple people, too many cooks in the kitchen sort of thing. So you want one person responsible for everything that happens with the project. So this one person will have a mechanical engineer report to them, a test engineer report to them, a scheduler report to them, and they work on the project. Once they're done with the project, they go back to their departments, either to do things that they do on a day-to-day on an ongoing basis, or to maybe work on a different project, right? So depending upon the kind of organization that you have set up. So project organization is usually a temporary setup. So you bring a group of people together to do a project. Once a project is done, the group is disbanded. Now, this might not be something, the project doesn't have to be something really grand or anything like that. Say, for example, if you have, say, let's say that there's an office and you have to set up a, say, Christmas party or something like that, right? So you bring 3 or 4 people together, some people who are good at, figuring out schedules of different people, figuring out when to have it, where to have it, what kind of food or drinks do you need to have, making sure that they don't flout any company regulations or things like that. So you have a group of people who come together, they manage the project, which is to manage, say, the Christmas party. The Christmas party happens, and then they disband. They probably won't get back together till the next year, and it might not be the same group of people who work on the next Christmas party, right? So that's a very simple sort of project organization, and that's a temporary structure, right? So once in this project organization, once the mechanical engineer has done designing whatever is needed for that particular project, they go back to the design department and they work on whatever the design department is generally working on, right? Now, while this is true for a project organization, sometimes this sort of structure can be made permanent. So like I said, there are lots of times where companies just work on one project after the other. Now, even if it doesn't seem like it, for example, if you look at Boeing, right? So Boeing builds airplanes, right? And they might build, say, 747s. 747 is Boeing, right? Yeah, 747. And if they build multiple 747s, each time they build a 747, it is considered a project because it is a humongous plane and it takes multiple months to build. Multiple people are involved. Different kinds of material is involved, right? And every time they build a plane, even if they have very standardized ways of building it, every time they build a plane, something different goes wrong. Right? And that's always true. Anytime you build large things go wrong. I have personal experience with this. I mean, not that I built a 747 plane. I was working as an engineer where they put together very large gas turbines. When I say very large gas turbines the size of, 4 or 5 buildings put together. These large gas turbines are usually used as energy sources for large factories like car manufacturing plants or, oil manufacturing plants. They need to have their own power generation locations, and they use these large gas turbines. Sometimes they use these large gas turbines for that. And even though there was a standardized way of manufacturing these gas turbines, every time you put a gas turbine together, because they are so large and have so many different parts and so complex, each time it was considered a project in itself, right? So So that's the idea there. So sometimes this project organization, instead of being a temporary thing where people just come together to do an office party, it might be a permanent structure. If the project organization is a permanent structure, it's called a matrix organization. Right, so in a matrix organization, you still have these different departments: marketing, operations, engineering, and finance. But once, let's say that Bob here is finished the marketing portion of project one, they don't go back to the marketing department and do something day to day. They're then just assigned to a next project, right? So each project requires a certain number of marketers, operations managers, engineers, and finance people. And every time that happens, they come together, they work on the project. Once they're done, then they're assigned to a next project, and then they're assigned to the next project, and then they're assigned to the next project, and so on. So everything that the company does is a project, and you have a group of people who come together for a project, and they do that, and then they dispatch, right? And that's the idea of a matrix organization. Now, this is called a matrix organization because all of these people are still employees. In many organizations, and this is true especially in the gig economy, what happens sometimes, I shouldn't say usually, sometimes, is that somebody has an idea, they have some money to fund the idea, but they don't have enough money to have employees. So they hire contractors. Right, so they hire these different contractors who work on say a single part of that idea. They get paid for that, and then they leave. And a good example of this is if you look at many of these people who make these big creators on YouTube or on TikTok and all of these places, a lot of times they don't do their own editing. When they start off, that's part of what you do. You do everything within the company yourself. But after you grow to a certain amount, certain level, you hire professional editors. And these professional editors are not employees, they are independent contractors, right? And then you might hire somebody else, you might hire a group of people to do marketing for you, right? Again, independent contractors. So this sort of matrix structure, but where the people working on the projects are not employees but independent contractors, is a very common thing, especially in this gig economy, right? So that's something to keep in mind. So project organization is helpful. So project organization is one end of the spectrum where people just come together to do a project, disband, and then go back to their usual work. Then the other end of the spectrum, you can think of matrix organization, where everything is arranged for doing projects, right? So project organization is useful when work can be defined with a specific goal and deadline, when they are small one-off things that you do, but then you have to go back. The job is somewhat unique or somewhat unfamiliar to the existing organization. The work contains complex interrelated tasks, right? So that's something to keep in mind, right? And then finally, project cuts across organizational lines. That is pretty obvious, right? So that's the main difference between a project organization and a matrix organization. Now, so what does the project manager do? So like I said, project manager is the one person who usually manages everything that comes to the project. But project manager is usually responsible for making sure the project is completed on time, is completed on budget, and it meets any quality goals that it needs to meet, right? So the project manager is also usually responsible for figuring out the suppliers and making sure that suppliers arrive on time. Any employees or any independent contractors you hire, they come in on time, do their work on time, all of that. So all of that is part of being a project manager. And the best example of this, if you ever say hire a construction company to do something in your house. Let's say that you want to have your kitchen replaced, or you want to have, say, extension built to your house, or you're building a house from ground up. You usually have a single contractor who's a point of contact for you, and that person is a project manager. They're not going to do everything. In fact, if you're building a house, there's a project manager, main contractor who you contract with, and that person will hire subcontractors. They will hire somebody who knows how to do kitchens, and that person will do the kitchen. They'll hire somebody who knows how to do bathrooms, and they'll do the bathrooms. And even within the bathroom, somebody else might be doing the tiles, and somebody else might be doing the plumbing, right? So there are many different subcontractors who work on the larger project. And the project manager is responsible for all of that. And that's the idea. So yes, they have to make sure that the people assigned to the project receive motivation, direction, and information to do their jobs, right? And a good example, so if you're thinking about, well, is project management for me, right? So a few things to keep in mind. You should be a very disciplined, very organized sort of person. You should have good communication skills, and you should be good with people. That's the main... So that sort of sets you up to be a good project manager. Right. And the last thing that I'll talk about in this video before we move on to the next video is the idea of ethical issues. So ethical issues are extremely important when it comes to project management because usually they are one-off things. So anything that happens there does not trickle into, let's say, the ongoing on an ongoing basis. I mean, which is true. I mean, some of the things that we talk about are true even on an ongoing basis. But if a project happens, so let's say a contractor say, hey, let me take you out to dinner, or let's go on a vacation, I'll pay for the vacation, or something like that. So if things like that happen, that is an ethical gray area. Now if you're friends with that person and they're doing it because they're friends and not because they're expecting that you will give them the contract or something like that. So there are things to keep in mind, ethical things to keep in mind. And I'm not saying these things don't happen if you're running operations in a company on a day-to-day basis, but they are less likely to happen, and the impact is much higher because you're doing a one-off thing, and if things go wrong, the whole thing will be destroyed. Right. So other things, pressure to alter status reports, to mask delays. So the important things about projects to remember is that time and money. These are two things, two dimensions of the same. Money is the main thing, but time and budget. So you have to be on time, you have to be within budget. Right. So if you're not, then you might be asked to alter status reports to mask any delays, or you might be asked to, falsify reports to change expenses and things like that. Compromise on material quality sometimes, or if you agree to some bonuses to some people if they finished early on time, and pay those bonuses and things like that. So all of these things are part of the ethical issues to keep in mind. Again, these things have a much larger impact on projects because projects are one-off things as opposed to day-to-day running of a company where they are more likely to be found out. Right. So that's why it's important to talk about this. All right. So I'm going to stop this video here. In the next video, we'll talk about the idea of a work breakdown structure. So I alluded to this in the first video, where when you have a larger project, you usually break it down into smaller pieces, and then you look at the smaller pieces, and then you manage the project using the smaller pieces, right? So how do you do that? So what is a work breakdown structure? How do you look at work breakdown structures? We'll talk about that in the next video. All right. I'll see you all there. Take care.